You're listening to the Patriot Nation podcast.
All right, welcome into another edition of the Patriot Nation podcast, of course, brought to you by Game Time and Prize Picks. And Matt, it's that time of year again already. It is football season again. It's always football season around here. I mean, let's be honest, but the Bruins have officially been eliminated. And
R.I.P.
I know, R.I.P. and peace to the Bruins. And OTA started today. So, we get the first feeling of football. Of course, it's not real football, but they're on the field, they're practicing, they're throwing the ball around, they're going through the motions and stuff. So it looks cool. It looks like football, and so we'll take it.
Yeah, it's the Patriots released like a mic'd up video today of Gerard Mayo and Drake May, and that made me feel pretty good. Seeing that was pretty nice. I liked that. Weather's warm out too. Like it's very much. It feels like we just turned a corner very quickly here.
Yeah, and it's like it's been nasty out like nonstop for the last few weeks, and to get some nice weather in is awfully nice. Feels like summer's right around the corner, so which is good. So let's get into the OTAs because you mentioned that the mic'd up thing, and I loved what I saw from Drake May today. Number one, with the way that he communicated with the guys and the way that he kind of handled the adversity on the field. Really not a ton of adversity, but you know what I mean? Like trying to kind of feel each other out. But one thing that stuck out to me, and I actually reposted or tweeted this out or whatever, posted this right before we started, was a clip at the end of practice. Mm-hmm. The hill is still there, which I love. They're still running hills, even with Mayo in there. And he's running hills next to Jalen Polk. And he beats Polk up the hill. And they're jogging back down the hill together. And he goes, hey, look, I'm going to run, but you better beat me. And so, that to me, I like that quite a bit. Like, I like the way that he did that. He's not afraid. We're talking about day one of OTAs, and I know it's another rookie, but it doesn't matter. The fact that he's not afraid to call out another guy and be like, hey, look, you're not giving enough because I shouldn't be able to beat you up the hill. Right. And I'm not gonna go slower for you. You better beat me because you're faster than me. Right. And that's the type of stuff that you love to see. Again, it's nothing. It's a little tiny thing on May 20th. But you still like to see kind of that beginning stages of that leadership. And I was happy to see that.
Well, I think you just love, like, first of all, the fact that the hill is still there. I absolutely love that is a staple of the Patriots. And, I think when I think of that hill, all I think of is the overtime in Super Bowl 51 and how conditioned the Patriots were. Like game, that moment in that game is why you do that. I'm glad they're sticking with that conditioning. It's just, I like the leadership that you talk about, the drive, the bond between May and Polk really seems to already be there. Like you saw them at the Bruins game mic'd up together and they're like hitting each other and like all that, like they've been boys for forever. Like it's the same kind of reactions you do with your best friend. And these guys presumably just met each other. And in the mic'd up segment, it's them. You have May taking Polk aside, talking about what he wants him to do on a scramble drill. It's OTAs. They're talking about like on a scramble drill, hey, here's where I need you to be. And it was very much May's explaining what he wants out of Polk. And Polk starts the explanation. And May is like, oh, yes, you already know. Like they were already on the same page. They didn't need more work. They already had it, which I absolutely love. I mean, that's what you want. Polk is supposed to be one of your go-to guys here. And building that connection early on is huge. Both guys seem bought in. At this stage in the process, that's all you can ask for.
100%. And I think you've seen it with Baker too. Practice ends, everyone else goes inside, and for 15, 20 minutes, Baker and Polk and May are out there, throwing. And just, going half speed, not going full speed, but going half speed so that, hey, this is where I want you to run. All right, we're running a post, or we're running, a dig, or we're running a slant, or whatever it is. Supposedly May was calling out the route, and the guys were running it, and again, running it at half speed, essentially, right? But they were still going through the motions of, this is where I want you to be. This is how it should look every time we get out there. And it's that type of stuff that's going to make the difference when you get into September and October and November, and maybe not even this year, right? We don't know if Drake May is going to play, right? But he's preparing as if he's going to play, right? And so that becomes, I like the fact that he's taking that initiative and he's jumping right to the forefront, which is great. He's also learning and watching what Jacoby Brissett does. And he's in Jacoby Brissett's ear nonstop. And he's watching what Brissett does. And when they split up in twos, he's with Brissett. And that's intentional because they want him with Brissett. Because Brissett's a professional, right? The guy's been around for a long time. He's one of those locker room guys that everyone loves. He's a guy that works his butt off, has maximized his talents, in my opinion. And I think, is the exact type of guy you want Drake May to be mentored by. And so they're like, hey, stick with him, do what he does. And, if you're ready week one, great. If you're not, that's fine. Learn from Jacoby, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. It's funny. You also mentioned kind of the learning aspect. One of my takeaways looking at OTAs right off the bat is the way I think you can tell right away that learning and team and not competition is the priority right now by what seems to be the depth chart of the way everybody is treated across the board. If you look at the depth chart for players right now, it seems to be simply based on seniority. How long have you been here, or how long have you been in the building? At quarterback, it's Brissett, and then it's Bailey Zappi, and then it's Drake May, and then it's Joe Milton. Which is funny because I don't think Bailey Zappi is going to be in the building in a month or 2 months, based on the reporting this morning, I believe, from Albert Breer and some of the things that Gerard Mayo has said. But then you look at, the starting X receiver for them today, Tyquan Thornton. He's not going to be your starting X receiver week one. At least I highly doubt it from anything that we've seen. But it does seem that right now they're saying people who have been here are going to be at the top of the depth chart. People who are new are going to be closer to the bottom. Not as an insult, but it seems to be a way to focus on, this isn't competitive at this point. This is about learning. This is about team building. This is about installing the new things that we have to do, setting things up that way, which I think is an interesting way to do it. This is, I mean, even Bill Belichick always said, these aren't competitive practices. That's what this is about. Nobody's earning roster spots right now. You might lose one if you're not picking up the things properly.
Correct.
Nobody is earning a roster spot right now. It does seem like that is very clearly the focus, with a whole new offense and, to a degree, a new defense and new special teams all being installed right now.
Yeah. Well, and really, honestly, for me, that's one of the interesting things about what is going on right now. And you see May kind of talking, Mayo talking to the team and going through, and hey, and Belichick, listen, Bill did the same thing, right? Like, let's not pretend like Bill didn't do the same thing, walking around talking to guys, coaching guys up here and there. Mm-hmm. He was never mic'd up for it, but he did the same stuff, right?
He was back in 2009 when he was mic'd up for the full season. They have all the stuff from the practices and stuff that year. It's the same thing. It works. It's good coaching.
100%. Yeah, and that's one of those things, right? And I like the way that things are shaking out right now. Now, there's a long way to go. A long way to go, right? We're talking about, it's May 20th and they're through one OTA practice. But it's, even though it's early, you get those kind of early feelings like, okay, this looks pretty good. Now, the question then becomes, when adversity strikes, because it's going to, how do you respond to adversity, right? The great leaders, they can lead when things are easy and when there's no stakes. That's easy. But it's when you see the true leaders is when it sucks and everything is shit. And it's, how do we respond to that? And then that guy steps up, right? Mac Jones did not do that. Now, maybe it's not just his fault, and it wasn't just his fault. Let's be honest. It wasn't just his fault, but he didn't respond the way that he needed to respond. And he's not the only one, by the way. But I think for me that, that's going to be the time that time will tell with Drake May. And of course, there's no way to know until that happens. But hopefully, when that does happen, he'll pass that test too.
Yeah. Yep. Another thing I thought was interesting today. I'm going to take away two things from Juju Smith-Schuster today.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, I think the headline here is him saying that he thought he was at about 60% last season with his knee.
Yeah.
And he feels like he's at 100% now. I'll lead off and say, I don't know if I believe that really, that it's 100% from the reporting that has been done previously. The rumors that you hear, it's some kind of a degenerative issue of some kind or a long-standing knee issue. And if that's the case, I highly doubt it's actually 100%.
Yeah.
But he played well for the Chiefs in 2022. Seemed to have some issues throughout the season. I think it was either in the Super Bowl or very late in the season that he developed the knee injury that hampered him in Kansas City. And he was not the same player in New England last season that he was in Kansas City in 2022. Nowhere close. You got one glimpse of it, and it was that game in Pittsburgh late in the season, and he didn't play again after that. That was it.
Right.
That was it. But if it is even 100% of what it can be now, if his health in his knees is improved from where it was last season, that's big for New England for two reasons. One, Juju Smith-Schuster was a good player in 2022. Not great, but useful. You can put him on the field and he will do things for you. He's good after the catch. He's a big body guy for a slot receiver, which is something that I think they like. He can help you out in the run blocking game. He's a very good teammate, great team leader, locker room kind of guy too. So you put it all together, and this is a guy who I think could help the Patriots win football games if that knee is actually healthy and if he looks anything like he did in Kansas City a couple of years ago. The other part of this is that if he ends up being that kind of guy, the Patriots look at it and say, we want Demario Douglas taking these snaps. We want to stay young and develop him. Well, now you might actually find a suitor for Juju Smith-Schuster on the trade market.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, that would be a pretty sweet thing.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And again, whether it's here or somewhere else, him being good is a good thing, right? Obviously. Yeah. So, it sucks they chose him over Jacoby Myers. That obviously was the wrong take. Yes. Clearly. I think it's pretty clear, pretty obvious at this point. But I can also see, and we talked about it at the time, why they made that decision, right? And so, if they can be not proven right, but if you can see that from Juju this year, and then we can look at it and say, okay, we're feeling better about where they're at. And again, like you said, they might say, we want those snaps to go to Pop Douglas, but we can get a third-round pick back for Juju in moving him because he looks like the old him. And if you could do that, that's great. Whether or not you'll be able to do that, I don't know. But we'll see. And I think you're totally right as to what's going to happen. So,
you'll take anything. And then there's the one other thing from that was when he left the presser, he said he made a comment about how the locker room is a lot better this year than it was last year. I'm not surprised at the last time all these guys were in the locker room together was it after a snowy and cold home game where they lost to the Jets and couldn't move the ball and everybody was hurt. And you're all sitting there waiting to see if you just got your head coach fired. So yeah, I'd be a little bit upset if the morale wasn't better than it was the last time you were in that building. But that's I think in some ways you're going to get a bump this year in terms of morale just because it's a change. Doesn't mean it's going to last. Right. It's usually a temporary thing, but it helps. You can get a boost off of it and then go from there. And I think I'm glad to hear that the people all seem to think the locker room is in good shape right now. Yeah.
And Jamari says, that was a shot towards Bill and it certainly may have been a shot towards Bill. I also wonder too, if it wasn't a shot at some of the guys that were here last year that aren't here anymore. We'll see. But I think that we'll see what happens. And again, I think that and Kano says that we were wrong about the Patriots last year. We were very wrong about the Patriots last year with them winning 11 games. But again, we thought that Mac Jones was going to be the Mac Jones of 2021 and take kind of a step forward with an actual offensive coordinator, and that did not happen. All of their wide receivers sucked. Karen McBoyne got hurt, and they had no one except for Demario Douglas. And so the question is going to be, regardless of who the quarterback is, how are the guys going to respond to what happened, to what happened last year? And honestly, what do you get from your wide receivers? What do you get from Polk? What do you get from Baker? Do you get something from Tyquan Thornton? Tyquan Thornton said he's added a bunch of weight.
That'd be nice.
Does that help? Right? Do you get something from Juju? Is he going to be healthy? Right? So that's some of the stuff for me where we can kind of see where it goes. And Jamari, by the way, I was talking about one person in particular, and that was Mac Jones. I just think Mac Jones was so in his own head that I don't know what he was like in the locker room. I just feel like he was a mess on the field. I don't know what was going on in the locker room.
Well, I think you look at the way things were last year too. From everything that's been reported, there was a lot of tension within the offensive coaching staff last year.
Yeah.
I know you got your offensive line coach leaves partway through the season because of a health issue.
Mm-hmm.
You have a quarterback controversy where neither quarterback is playing particularly well and they don't get along. You have an offensive coordinator who, while I think is a smart guy and pretty good at his job, he's not a morale guy in the locker room. We'll put it that way with Bill O'Brien. That's not what he's bringing to the table.
That is correct.
Yeah. And, if we're going to name names here, Devontae Parker and Trent Brown seemed to be relatively outspoken at points with their displeasure, which I think we all understand. I'm not happy with them doing it, but it's understandable. And you put that all together and all the outside noise, I'm sure things were tense in that locker room. It's the offseason. There's no pressure right now. This is all the fun and love stuff. So it should be better, but I'm glad that it is. I don't think there's a shot at – if that is a shot at Bill, I think that's close to a shot at Bill O'Brien and not Bill Belichick.
True. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. Yeah. And
by the way,
mentioned Devontae Parker.
Speaking of Adrian Clem, because we're going to get to Parker, but speaking of Adrian Clem, I was on Sporkle today, just messing around or whatever. And it was like, name all the players that were on all three Super Bowl winning teams, like the first three, the original 3 Super Bowl winning teams. And so it goes by position. And so you're like hitting, position here and there, blah, 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 whatever. By the way, I forgot Matt Chatham. Can't friggin' believe it. I'm like typing in Pierre Woods and I'm like, wait, I'm like 58. I'm like, who the hell was 58? I'm like going back and I typed in Pierre Woods and I typed in someone else too. And I'm like, oh, I typed in Marty Moore. I think I typed in Marty Moore and Pierre Woods.
You're forgetting the Matt Chatham
and I was like,
return for a touchdown against the Giants.
Did I possibly forget that? I was so mad. I was that thinking too.
You're forgetting the Matt Chatham tackling the streaker in the Super Bowl.
Brutal, absolutely brutal. So I apologize to him. I know Matt's a loyal listener to the show. I apologize, Matt. But I think so. A guy who had a position all to himself, which was injured reserve, was Adrian Clem by himself. IR in 01, 03, and 04. He played 3 games in 03 and 2 games in 04 and 0 games in 01 and ended all three years on IR. I was like, you got to be kidding me, man.
That's brutal.
Yeah. Brutal. So anyways, he played 16 games in 2002 when they didn't make the playoffs. So but anyways, I just thought that was funny. I was going through and I was like, oh my God, Adrian Clem, what a flipping career that guy had, dude. But anyways, yes, Devontae Parker. What the heck, dude? What that one? It kind of shocked me. Although seeing him on the field the last few years, maybe shouldn't have shocked me. But I was still surprised by that.
I mean, I thought even with everything, he could still be a useful NFL player. Like I kind of like the fit in Philly for him because he can be the 3rd or 4th option, and he's going to be facing a bad corner on the other team.
Yeah,
in one-on-one coverage, he's never getting doubled.
It's not with those
easy match for him. But yeah, I guess he's done. Which, man, I think that makes the DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Parker decision making last offseason look even worse.
1,000,000,000 times worse. Yeah.
Yeah. And I defended Bill on that at the time because I assumed he knew something about Devontae Parker that we didn't. He didn't. No. We all knew the same stuff, and Devontae Parker did not have it anymore and been injured a lot in his career. And I guess he's done. Funny enough, his last touchdown reception was still in 2022. He didn't have one last year.
Brutal, just brutal. I mean, hand up on that one. I was anti DeAndre Hopkins from the beginning. just a stupid take. A stupid take looking back. It's just like, what was I thinking? Not wanting DeAndre Hopkins. But again, kind of the thought process was we felt like we had a guy already in Devontae Parker, and couldn't really get rid of Parker. We'd already signed him to the extension. And so it was like, well, what do you want us to do? Like, we can't, And so clearly that was a mistake. Should have gone with Parker. Should have gone with Hopkins, who's still in the league and had a pretty good year. I mean, it wasn't incredible last year, but had a pretty good year.
Hopkins,
or neither. That's a great point.
Yeah, Hopkins had over 1,000 yards, I think.
Did he really?
Yeah, he was still pretty productive with a rookie quarterback back there.
Hey, you're right.
He was a good player last year. I think you'd love to have him in New England right now.
I'll tell you that much. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's rough. And that contract, and I don't think the Patriots get any relief on it from anything either. They traded him and had to absorb stuff, and I think they still.
Yeah. No, just an absolute bust. One of the worst signings of the end of the Belichick kind of GM, cycle. You just look back at that Parker deal and you just think like, what are we doing, man? And they gave up a fifth and a third to get him. And it's one of those ones.
I think they gave up a third for Parker and a fifth.
Oh, maybe you're right. But either way, that's a good amount. It's a good amount of stuff to give up for Parker. Asset wise, and you just look at it and just say, man, he sucked. He sucked. He was never good with the Patriots. They gave like 2 weeks where you were like, oh, that guy looks pretty good.
There was the Baltimore game that looked like, oh man, we finally got a wide receiver one.
Right.
We never really saw that again.
No.
He had moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was it.
So anyways,
another OTA thing that we found out, Cole Strange.
Yeah, month to month. That doesn't sound great.
I think he said day to day, week to week, month to month.
Yeah.
Which I don't really know entirely how to interpret that, but like I'm not sure if month to month actually means anything. Month to month might just be the course of the whole injury. But man, it is May. The injury happened in November, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's not great.
No.
Not great.
And I feel bad for Cole Strange too, because he just seemed like he finally had it going a little bit last year. And he reportedly was playing through an injury last year. I think they said he was going to need surgery after the season anyway. And we don't know exactly what the injury is, I don't think. But if he really is month to month at this point, then we're looking at, July or August, maybe at the earliest is my guess. Decent chance of him starting the season on the PUP list. And if he's starting on the PUP, then like he's obviously not going to be a week one starter, but like he's probably going to be worked in as a backup to start. And that's it's not a career ender, but that feels like that could be the end of the road for him in New England unless he comes back out of that injury looking really good.
Yeah, I agree with you. So interesting point by Jamari here, and I just want to see what you think about it. He said the Strange is a bigger bust than N'Keal, which is like a tough. I mean, it's how do you choose between those two bums?
I think I'm gonna let this season play out before answering that definitively because there's still a possibility that Strange does come out this season and play well based on some of the stuff that we saw last year. But if he doesn't play, or he plays like he did for most of last season and not near the end before he got hurt, then I think so. I believe picked higher in the draft.
He was 3 picks higher, yeah.
Yeah. And you look at how much of a reach that was too. Like for all the N'Keal Harry stuff, he went about where he was supposed to in that draft. He was selected above other receivers, but other guys I think just felt like Harry went where he was supposed to roughly and just didn't pan out. So it's like a bust, but that's just like a regular wide receiver bust that like really stinks. Strange is like reaching on a guy at a position that's less valuable who can't perform. Like, yeah.
Well, yeah, and listen, you're not wrong. It's a really good point. I don't necessarily disagree. However, here's my problem. Here's my problem. My problem isn't N'Keal Harry. My problem is Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, and who's the other guy? It's another one too. Who am I missing? Who's the other second round wide receiver?
JJ Arcega-Whiteside?
No, not him. No.
Andy Isabella?
No. Was it only those three? I thought there was another one too. Either way, it was you didn't just miss with him.
Yeah.
You went for the position and you drafted like the worst one.
Well, and like
32,
of the guys in that mold too, like if you wanted a physical ball winner, like the tier of guys, it was DK Metcalf, it was AJ Brown, and it was N'Keal Harry.
Right.
The fact that two of those guys ended up being good.
Yeah.
And like DK Metcalf fell for, I think, mostly for medical issues.
Yeah.
So you basically had a 50-50 chance on one of these guys is going to be Pro Bowler. Is AJ Brown an All-Pro? Has he won All-Pro? He could win that at least if he hasn't already. One of those guys is that type of guy, and the other one will not be on our roster in the NFL.
Yeah.
They got the wrong one.
And that's the hard part, right? And listen, if you want to sit there and say that Cole Strange shouldn't have been taken where he was, I would 100% agree with you. And the Patriots could have drafted Dylan Parham at pick 90, which is where I think he went to Vegas, or they could have taken Zach Tom in the 5th round or whatever what Green Bay did, and he started for them, right? Like,
or they could have gone. I think was it Tyler Smith who was available there too? I think ended up being a tackle or.
So Tyler Smith actually went 24, but again, the Patriots traded out 21, so they could have taken him at 21.
Yeah.
And I think he had some injury concerns, did he not, Tyler Smith? And I think that's why he dropped to where he did. But either way, when Tyler Linderbaum went 25th, who's a really good center for Baltimore. Not that you need a center, but you get the idea. Like and so of course there are second guesses that you can make. It's if he doesn't turn it around and actually play, it's a really, really one of the worst picks that Bill ever made. And it's kind of that parting gift out the door. Like, hey, not only did I miss on N'Keal in 2019, but then I missed on Mac Jones, and then I missed on well, not only did I miss on Mac Jones, but then I didn't surround Mac Jones with any talent, and then I missed the next year on Cole Strange. And then Tyquan Thornton in back-to-back picks.
Well, and it's the whole 2022 offseason. It's the whole thing. Like if you want the whole Bill Belichick thing is that you have a rookie quarterback, you get the chance to build around him. You whiff on every single move.
Right.
You miss on the offensive line, both in the draft and your internal evaluations.
Yep.
You miss on wide receiver, both in the draft, your internal evaluations, and your free agent additions. Tight end, ended up being all right because they had signed guys. But this was after the Jonnu Smith signing, which is still brutal, and they were still trying to make that work in 2022.
Yep.
Running back was fine. Running back, he gets a pass on. That's okay.
Yep.
But they abandoned the fullback, and they bring in Matt Patricia and that whole thing. And the 2020, like that's the reason the Mac Jones thing is tough because, like, obviously that didn't work out. But I am not entirely sure it was the wrong pick because they needed a quarterback. He was a consensus first-round guy. You're picking in the middle of the draft. I think that's worth the gamble, even if it doesn't work out. I don't think Bill was fired because Mac Jones doesn't work out. It's because you fail every other thing around him. Because if you build, you build a good offense with no quarterback, there are ways to get a quarterback and try to make something work to a degree, or say, hey, we're going to give you another chance because you clearly understand it. Like, if you build a good team, but the quarterback isn't good, that's one of the few occasions where GM gets the chance to draft multiple quarterbacks because you're showing that you know what to do on offense. Look at Kyle Shanahan out in San Francisco.
Sure.
They whiffed badly on a quarterback in the same exact draft. They built a good offense, which meant they could put the last pick in the draft into that offense and make it work. And then he developed and ended up being better than what anybody expected him to be. But you get the chance to even stick around after that failure because of everything else that you have built. They didn't do that in New England. So
That's correct. That is quite correct. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So, anyways, one last quick note before we take a break here, and then get into our best NFC off seasons. Matthew Judon. There was a note about Matthew Judon in Mike Reese's piece on Sunday, talking about how Judon is unlikely to play under his contract. Listen, I've been saying this literally since day one of the offseason. Matthew Judon's not playing on it. They gave him the Stephon Gilmore treatment, which is that they gave him money from this year, last year. He's not playing on that contract, nor should he. And I think the Patriots know that, and they are interested and willing to give him a new deal, which is great news. They just have to get it done. That's all. Sounds like they're working towards it. They know it. He knows it. They're working on it. But, it becomes one of those things where they just have to now get it done. And so, and I've seen people say, well, don't extend him and just give him money this year. No. Give him 2 more years. Give him, bump his pay up a little bit this year and give him 2 more years, and then let him retire a Patriot. That's what you should do, because he is that leader in the locker room. He's been that guy. He clearly wants to be that guy. He's taken on that role. Let him continue doing that. And so, and look, he's called himself out that he hasn't, that he hasn't performed at the end of the year, and he hasn't stayed healthy, and he hasn't. And so he understands what comes with it and everything. But I just think that even if you think his play is failing a little bit, I think the leader in the locker room, especially with a ton of young guys, it's important. And so give him 2 more years and let him retire a Patriot.
Agreed. I did think it was weird. There's a lot of defensive veterans that are not at OTAs. It's not just Judon who's not there. No Bentley,
yeah.
I don't
Penny
think.
Jennings. No, Bentley wasn't there. Jennings wasn't there. Godshaw
no
wasn't
Uche.
there. Yeah. So, which is surprising, but I'm not sure why.
I don't think we heard a single thing about the defense at OTAs. I don't think a single media member was looking at what they were doing at that part of the field.
No. It was
All
also
eyes on 10.
Yep. There's also day one. You never know. Could be that they have that they're back next year. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not.
Oh, back tomorrow.
I'm not worried. It's going to be essentially the same defense. I don't think they're installing anything new.
True.
So it was there. Like, I'm not concerned about guys skipping, but I did think it was notable that there were a couple guys in there who I think are leaders to a degree, who really no Judon, no Bentley. I think that was interesting to me. That caught my eye.
Yeah, I agree. So it was Judon, Jennings, Tavai, Uche, Cole Strange, KB, and Devon Godshaw.
So Bentley was there. I was thinking Tavai then. That's what I got to mix up with.
Tavai. Yep.
So
because I was thinking Bentley too, but it wasn't. But anyways. So, all right, let's take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about NFC offenses and go from there. All right, so we'll be right back. And here we go.
The Celtics are in the playoffs, and there's nothing like the atmosphere of the Garden during a Celtics game. And the easiest way to get in the building is by using the Game Time app. The prices on Game Time actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Now, one of the nice things about Game Time is that they have all-in pricing, which means you see the fees up front. They're not hitting you with fees after you've already paid or as you get to the payout screen. They're giving them to you up front so you know exactly what you're paying. They also have the lowest price guarantee. If you find a price lower, they will credit you 110% of the difference. And they give you a seat view before you purchase anything. You can even move your phone around and see how it looks. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, so let's get into this NFC offseason. We're talking about this off air. Man, this is like hard. The NFC is so strange this year. But let's start with you want to start with the bottom 3 and then go to the top 3 afterwards? I think that's what
we can do that. Yeah, we're doing best and worst off seasons.
Let's do the bottom 3. You want to start with one?
Yeah, to me, I think the worst off season in the NFC is the only clear one in this entire bunch. I don't know if we're on the same page here. It's got to be the Dallas Cowboys.
Ding, 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 ding.
Had a lot of guys leave And for the most part, their replacements are all internal. They're exercising a lot of faith in the guys they already had in the building. They don't completely hate, but they're losing some good players, guys that they have relied on. Tyron Smith and Tyler Biotish on that offensive line. Tony Pollard, Dorrance Armstrong. They brought back Zeke Elliott to fill in for Tony Pollard.
Just
like
seems like a terrible idea.
It's going to be Zeke and Rico Dowdle there next year. When they wanted the Texas running back this year in the draft, whose name is escaping me all of a sudden, and
Jonathan Brooks.
Panthers traded up and took him.
Yep.
So I couldn't take him. Then end up drafting a running back, and they're in just such a weird spot. And that doesn't even get into the conversations around, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, both going into the last years of their deals right now, and we haven't really heard extension talks on either one. So, the Cowboys they seem to be in a bit of purgatory right now.
Yeah, and we talked. I mean, listen, we talked about this as well in the fact that this was the opportunity. If you were going to move on from Mike McCarthy, this was the opportunity to do it. They didn't do it. They should have done it, and they didn't. And so that to me was a big mistake. And so you have him for one more year, but again, then the question becomes, well, what happens after that, right? What happens with Dak? What happens with CeeDee Lamb? What happens with those guys? We don't know, right? Now, the draft, I thought overall was pretty good, right? I was high on Marshawn Nealand, right, who they took in the second round. Cooper Beebe, a guard in the third round, solid player, right? Kalen Carson, who was one of my guys, not one of my guys, but a guy that I liked as well. Guyton in the first round is interesting because Tyler Guyton, I don't know if he's going to be a right tackle or a left tackle.
On our lads right now, they haven't slotted in as the starting left tackle.
Yeah. And so we'll see. But again, he was a starting right tackle in Oklahoma. So felt like he was going to be the right tackle. Now he's a left tackle. So again, that becomes that question of can he make that move? And especially as a rookie, right? And so it's not a rookie playing on a team like the Patriots where it's hey, we got some time to. No. This team wants to compete for a championship right now, this year. And again, you mentioned the Tony Pollard for Zeke Elliott, and Tony Pollard looked bad last year. Don't get me wrong. I mean, anyone that had Tony Pollard in fantasy knows that Tony Pollard sucked last year. But Zeke Elliott, I loved Zeke here when he was here last year. It was great as a number 2 back, as a guy that could spell, Ramondre Stevenson, and then be the guy for a game or two, but not for a whole season.
Well, they got Rico Dowdle as the other guy who was good for them and stretched. He was better than Tony Pollard. Rico Dowdle was the Tony Pollard last year. Tony Pollard was the Zeke Elliott all those years.
It's just so bizarre.
But it's just, it's a weird team. I can't tell if they think they're contending this year or if they think they're playing for the future.
And I think for the future, what are you doing?
I think if you're playing for the future, you should have already extended Dak Prescott and CeeDee.
Correct. Yep.
And if you are playing for, if you're playing for championships, that's what you should have done, I think. If you're playing for the future and for a reset, then you should have probably still signed CeeDee Lamb. There's no reason not to keep him.
Yeah, and traded Dak Prescott.
Trade Dak. And
100%.
If it's, February and Dak Prescott's for sale, yeah, teams are going to be interested in that. You think that the Steelers, I'm sure, would have gone for that over the guys that they ended up settling for in that quarterback room. Team like Denver, I could have seen potentially being interested instead of Bo Nix. And you wonder how that changes the Kirk Cousins market. If that changes so much in the NFL, if all of a sudden Dak Prescott is available. And right now, I think he's probably going to end up in Dallas. I think he is going to end up staying.
Yeah. Seems like it.
But they're just going to wait this out and make it stressful and pay more for him than they probably should have. And I don't quite get why. I don't know. Team has good players, not a lot of depth. It seems they seem likely to win 10 games and lose in the wild card round.
Yeah. Well, and that's honestly, it's kind of what their MO is, right? They're not going to win a playoff game. They're going to lose, get there, lose in the first round, and it just Doesn't make any sense. And especially when you look at, look at how much. And Russell Wilson was a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I understand that, but he hadn't won a Super Bowl in 10 years, right? He gets traded for an obscene amount of draft picks. Dak Prescott, I believe, is younger right now than he was then, right?
And he doesn't have the same concerns that somebody like Russell Wilson had.
Correct. So, like,
Russell
to
Wilson
me, you could have gotten 2 or 3 first-round picks for Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
And look, I think Dak Prescott's a good player. I think they should have extended him already. That's my opinion. But if you're not sold on him, you should have traded his ass, man. Like, what are you doing? Make a decision. He's the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. If you don't think he's the guy, you need to move on. Clearly they're having a hard time deciding if he's the guy. Trade him.
Here's why I said they're in purgatory. They don't know what they are right now. Feels like they're waiting, but we don't know what they're waiting for, and they're just going to play out a season as kind of this, well, I guess we have a decent football team, and there's no real I feel like you also probably should try to go a little bit more all in on this group if this is who you have right now. Like, if you are going to keep these guys, try to go a little bit more in on them. There's talent. Like, this team was good last year, and like, if you make the right moves, in theory, you could be the best team in the NFC.
Well, and that's the thing, right? And even like Nagan, who's a hater anyways, but says Dak is ass. Maybe you believe that. If you're the Cowboys and you believe that, and you aren't willing to look at the numbers he put up last year. You're telling me if in February, right, they say, hey, we're trading Dak Prescott, someone's not going to throw them an obscene amount of draft picks? Of course they are. Like, for the love of God, Bo Nix got drafted number 12 overall. Kirk Cousins got $100 million guaranteed. Like, someone was going to give you a ridiculous amount of compensation for Dak Prescott if you're willing to trade him. And if you don't think he's the guy, you're stupid not to take it. If they let him walk next year, if they don't re-sign him and let him walk next year, it's malpractice. If that's what happens.
Well, the difference too here is that, like, you compare it to like the Russell Wilson situation. The issue with Russell Wilson is that he was always very reliant on his athleticism because he kind of plays football the way Johnny Manziel did in some ways. There's a lot of just extending plays and creating things downfield. He's kind of looking for a home run on every single play. Russell Wilson was very, very good at that for a long time in his career because he's a great deep ball thrower. He's very quick and can evade sacks. And his athleticism started to diminish, and he didn't have his ability to consistently make quick decisions to fall back on, and that's where you saw things fall apart. Dak Prescott's like the complete opposite. He's not some like great athletic marvel. He's just like a regular good athlete with regular arm strength, and he wins by consistently making good decisions.
Right.
If you're a coach in the NFL, those are the guys that coaches love, because every coach is convinced that, well, if they just do what I say, of course we're going to win.
Right.
That's how every coach is thinking about it. Oh, this guy's just going to do whatever I tell him to and make the right reads. Yeah, obviously we're going to win a lot of football if we have this guy because I'm good at what I do. So a guy like that is going to get a huge return if you do put him on the market. And if you're Dallas, you just let Dak Prescott play this year, go 10-7, lose in the wild card round, and then he just signs somewhere else. I mean, that is organizational malpractice.
Jerry Jones should fire himself if that's the case, man. It's brutal. All right. Anyways, let's move on from flipping Cowboys. I know that we don't agree with all three. So who is your second? Because Dallas was on my list as well. So who's second on your list here, or who's the next team you want to talk about?
I'm going to stay right in the division.
Okay.
I'm going to go to Washington.
Okay.
Let's walk this through. They entered the offseason. You have the number 2 pick, so you get whatever quarterback you want that's not Caleb Williams.
Mm-hmm.
You got new ownership, a lot of money, fresh blood. You got the opportunity to completely reset your organization. And they whiff on hiring the coach that they want. You settle for Dan Quinn, who I don't think is a bad coach, but he's hardly a super inspiring one, especially when you have a young quarterback coming in. You hire Cliff Kingsbury, a guy who we still haven't really seen his offense succeed at the NFL level. This dude's he's never been an offensive coordinator in the NFL. I don't feel great about this hire. I did not one bit. You draft the consensus quarterback 3 at pick 2, and you reach on a ton of draft picks throughout the rest of the draft. It wasn't all bad. I like some of the draft picks. You reach on a ton of guys, and they ended up signing a bunch of guys who were just like over the hill as free agents. Like it was really weird. Zach Ertz in 2024
Really bizarre.
is their starting tight end on the depth chart right now. Bobby Wagner is one of their starting linebackers. They did bring in Frankie Louvu, which I like that for them. I don't know. Austin Eckler in 2024. This is their starting running back. Like I don't really see the plan here. It feels like they settled for less than they could have with basically every opportunity they had this offseason. And when you're trying to rebuild a franchise, you can't do that. They got their second best option basically everywhere on this. And, we talk about, is New England, ready to start Drake May? Is the infrastructure good enough? The infrastructure in Washington, I don't think is good enough right now for a quarterback. Their offensive line is still atrocious. They got an offensive coordinator who's going to not make that better, the way Cliff Kingsbury likes to call games. And they got a quarterback who's an old rookie. You basically have to start. I don't think you're going to think about sitting Jaden Daniels.
No.
So now we're putting a very thin old rookie behind a bad offensive line. Like,
it's not great. It's not great.
You put it all together. Just none of these parts don't fit for me. Not at all.
So I'm gonna give you a quick counterpoint. All right. I'm gonna give you a quick counterpoint. And my quick counterpoint is this. They drafted Johnny Newton, Mike Sainristil, and Ben Sinnott. How can I be mad if they drafted those guys, right?
Well, I like the Johnny Newton and I like the Mike Sainristil picks. Those were when I said not all of the guys they drafted were reaches. Ben Sinnott to me is not a scheme fit at all. No. I like Ben Sinnott. I don't understand how he fits with those guys.
And I also this is very similar to what happened to Luke Schoonmaker last year. I loved Luke Schoonmaker coming out of school. Loved him. I was like, this guy's great. I want him as my tight end. Blah blah blah. The 5th round is gonna be great. He gets drafted like 58th overall. I'm like, what are we talking about? Like, what is happening? And the same thing happened. I think what Ben Sinnott went 53. Like 50. I love Ben Sinnott. 53 overall is lunacy for Ben Sinnott.
I would have considered him at 68 for New England. I wouldn't have gone higher than that.
Yeah, and even still 68, I would kind of been like, yeah, it's a little early. I love the guy, so fine, but like it seems early, so maybe 53 isn't a huge reach, but I didn't love it there. And I think you're right as far as when you talk about kind of this new stuff. And look, we talked about how I felt about Jaden Daniels. I think Drake May is significantly higher than Jaden Daniels, in my opinion. And so time will tell, right? Maybe they're right about Jaden Daniels. We don't know, right? But I have a hard time disagreeing with you about Washington. However, they were not in my bottom 3. They certainly weren't in my top 3, but they weren't in my bottom 3 because one of the teams that I know I have that you don't are the Atlanta Falcons.
Before we get to that,
Go ahead.
I'm perusing this Washington depth chart right now a little bit further. There's one other name on here. So these are just some of the receivers real quick that he's going to be throwing to. You got Terry Dotson and McCaffrey as your starters.
Yeah.
Dax Milne, De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, guys like that who I think of in the NFL in 2024 as being players. I get to the 3rd row of the depth chart. Damiere Byrd. Damiere Byrd
playing football,
is still in the league for the Commanders.
The year of our Lord 2024. Damiere Byrd
fighting for a roster spot to catch passes from Jaden Daniels. Did not know he was still around. Credit to Damiere Byrd. He had his moments that year.
Yeah. And he's like wide receiver 7 for them. So
Oh yeah, this isn't a slam of Washington at all. That's just Damiere Byrd. Credit to him. He's still hanging around.
Yep, I like it. All right, so Atlanta Falcons for me. Look, this is about one thing and one thing only. You went out and paid an insane amount of money for Kirk Cousins and then drafted Michael Penix number 8 overall. What the hell are you doing? What are you doing? Why did you do that? It doesn't make any freaking sense. You have a top 10 pick with a ton of talent on the board, and you take a quarterback. And again, I'm okay with that. If that's what you want to do and you feel like he's the best player, fine, do it. He's also old, so you don't want to sit him on the bench for 2 years, right? So, but okay, fine, you draft the guy. But you just signed Kirk Cousins. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And yes, they're going to be better than they were last year. They have a chance, although I don't think they will, but they have a chance to win the division and make the playoffs. That's great. All that's great. Good for you. But you just signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year deal.
Yeah.
And now you're telling him, you get 2. Sorry, buddy, then you're out of here. And it's like, what? Like 2 months into him signing his contract. That's crazy. And you think about like the bad blood that Bledsoe had towards Belichick and, and even Kraft at times, not really Kraft, but Belichick at times for sure. And of course, those fences have been mended. How could you possibly mend the fences with Kirk Cousins? You just signed him to a $100 million contract. And then you draft his replacement right after? It's insane to me.
Well, think about what you're doing to the locker room, too. I think it was the guys on the Ringer show who had brought this up.
Mm-hmm.
Think about your key skill position players. It's Drake London. It's Kyle Pitts. It's Bijan Robinson. Who do you think they are naturally going to be closer to?
Right.
The young college quarterback who's a star and is about their age, or the middle-aged Coles guy?
Right.
The middle-aged Coles guy who's there. Both of these guys are new to the locker room. Like when it comes to just the hierarchy in the locker room, the relationships, you're already making it weird. And this isn't even really bringing up the fact that taking Michael Penix to 8 is a reach, like a massive reach, and you still have 2 guys with injury histories, which is just tough. I didn't have them in my worst 3 because, like, I think they're a better team this year, and they should probably win that division, in my opinion. I think they hired some of the right coaches, so like, I in that sense, I can't give them worst, but man, if it's worst single decision of the offseason, yeah, it's the Falcons, 100%.
By the way, Michael Penix is older than Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and Kyle Pitts. He's the oldest of those 4 guys. He's 2 full years older than Bijan Robinson. 2 years older than Bijan Robinson. So either way, but and listen, you're probably right in the fact that one single move is the one move that I look at. But to me, it's just at number 8. I mean, think about the guys that were drafted after that point. Think about the guy you could have drafted at number 8. You could have drafted Roma Dunze at number 8, or you could have drafted, whatever, the second best offensive. Well, I guess what's his name went the pick before.
The third best tackle, best defensive player.
Right. So it's like you could have drafted all those. You could have done any of this stuff, right? And instead you draft Michael Penix, and it just seems so bad. And I also just feel like you're tanking the locker room, and that's just stupid. Stupid.
Yeah. And if this causes friction that ends up costing them games in the regular season, then that's pretty bad. The flip side of this is that I do see a world in which for 2024, this ends up working out, in that if Kirk Cousins gets hurt, you should be a good backup, and like it might help you immediately this season. But just like the big picture, like there is no way to justify this in the big picture. There is no explanation that makes sense where people should still have their jobs.
Imagine if Kirk comes back, can't come back day 1 from his Achilles injury, and Michael Penix is getting all of the QB1 snaps, and then starts the year as the QB1 and like plays decently well. Now what? Do you put Kirk Cousins back in? It's like the whole disaster, man. I can't believe it.
What do you do if it's week 6? And you're 2-4,
right?
And Kirk Cousins isn't playing great,
right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, anyways, it's wild.
But he's not like playing poorly, like because if he's playing bad, I think your decision is pretty simple. But if he's playing just like mediocre, like
Right.
Mac Jones 2021 level of football,
Right. Yeah,
then
maybe
you're
not what we used to with Kirk Cousins, but like, guys coming off an Achilles, not 100% yet, but like pretty good.
Yeah. So yeah, and they made this bet.
Wild. All right.
Do we want my final one?
Get your final one, and I'll give you my final one too. Yep.
Yeah. This is in some ways to me similar to Dolphins offseason, like the 49ers. They didn't address the offensive line. That's why they lost they lost the Super Bowl for a couple things. Their wide receiver 2 can't separate from tight man coverage, from press man coverage. And their offensive line was not very good. And I think they helped that first issue by drafting Ricky Pearsall, but he's a reach, and they didn't address their contract situation at wide receiver really. And they drafted one offensive lineman. Like their starting offensive line is going to be the same. So I think the 49ers are probably as good in 2024 as they were in 2023. They might be a tiny bit better if Ricky Pearsall ends up living up to the hype. But long-term planning-wise, I think getting to this point without having a clear plan with wide receiver, like I think if you're them, I think you just move on from Debo. I think that is obvious to me. Brandon Ayuk is a clear number one. He's a receiver who can do everything you want a receiver to do. He's younger. He doesn't have injury concerns. You trade Debo for what you can get for him, and take Pearsall. They use the extra picks to address the offensive line, and you move forward. And it's tough because Debo is an emotional leader. You have to explain that to the locker room. But I don't know how you watch what happened in the Super Bowl last year and look at the fact that you only have room to keep one of those 2 wide receivers and get to the place you're at right now, this very second. It's really weird.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good one. My last one is the Seattle Seahawks. And the biggest reason for me with the Seahawks is that I do like the fact they bring in Mike McDonald. That's a really good hire, I think. Pete Carroll steps away though. Geno Smith just like didn't look that good, right? Frankly, if we're being honest, like Geno Smith had a really, really tough year. And what they traded for Sam Howell, which again is like, okay, I guess, but it seems kind of strange. Like, are you sold on, like, are you trading for Sam Howell because you think he can like maybe spot start for you, and you're not sold on, on Geno Smith and like
weird.
that's the stuff that I'm worried about. I do like their draft. I like the fact that they drafted Byron Murphy. He's a great player. Christian Haynes in the 3rd round. He was a really good player. That's really good value for them. I don't know if they necessarily hit. I mean, I like DJ James a little bit. AJ Barner, I like, but they're not great. I don't think they're going to have
Barner in the 4th or 5th, right?
They got Barner in the 4th, yeah, which is pretty solid.
Yeah, that to me, that was one of my reaches that I didn't like because I like AJ Barner a lot, but to me, he was like a 6th round guy.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
4th is tough,
right? So that's one of those things where, and DJ James in the 6th isn't terrible, right? Yeah. But again, it's like one of those where, I mean, it was fine, but it just wasn't. I looked at it and I'm like, they didn't get better. I feel like they're worse than they were at the end of last year.
I feel like they're there's a little bit of an identity crisis there.
Yeah.
Of them figuring out what this next generation is going to look like, and they just feel like they're in an awkward spot.
Yep, agreed. All right, let's take a break, and then we'll get into our top 3. We'll try to move a little quicker through those, but we'll go through our top 3, and then we'll get you guys out of here.
Prize Picks has something for every sports fan, from basketball, baseball, and hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick LeBron, Aaron Judge, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham all in the same entry. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, Prize Picks will have your back and not count that as a loss. Now this week, I'm actually going with Aaron Judge, Rafael Devers, and Bobby Witt Jr. to have over 1.5 total bases, and I'm going with Kevin Durant for more than 28 points and Nikola Jokic with more than 10 rebounds. Download the app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, if you download the app today and put in the code CLNS, they will match your first deposit up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
At this point, I'm never changing that. It's so good. Jokic is out now too. It's great. It's fantastic. What a great ad read that is.
That's
Um,
shout out Timberwolves. That was a great game. Super entertaining. And West Conference Finals is going to be fun.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna be a lot of fun. I shut that game off for a while because I get bedtime with the kids and everything like that, and I put it on. I'm like, they're getting blown out, and I'm like, all right, forget it, whatever, game's over. So I shut it off, and then I actually watched Whiplash last night. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It was an awesome movie, but
I have seen clips on TikTok, which is how
it's a phenomenal movie. But I was watching it on my phone, and I turned the game on mute, and I'm like, oh, let me just see how bad it is. And it was like 77-75, and I was like, wait, what? Everyone was winning? What's going on here, dude? Yeah. And then I just had it on kind of in the background as I was watching the movie, and sure enough, they held on and won. And you're like, oh my God, man. Like, just the fact that they pulled that off is incredible. And doing that against Denver, that Denver team. And we'll see what happens. Listen, no matter what happens, don't listen to Felger and Maz. No matter what happens, if the Celtics win the championship, they win the championship, and no one can ever take that away from you. And it doesn't matter who they played; it makes no difference. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
trophy's a trophy. Well, it's you won about like Timberwolves beat Denver. Like if you're playing in the conference finals or in the finals, you're either playing teams that were really good in the regular season or teams who played well enough to beat teams that were really good in the regular season. Like when you make it that far, I'm not entertaining any kind of you played a weak opponent discussion. No.
Well, and that's one of those things that someone was saying about the Celtics. Like the Celtics are the number one seed, and doesn't look like anyone in the East can compete with them. And everyone's like, the playoffs and this guy and it's like, yeah, but they finished the regular season 14 games above anyone else. Like they were way better than everyone else in the East. We knew that going into the playoffs. You're surprised and annoyed that they just killed everyone. Like it's the way it goes. And there's a whole nother series left to go. So we'll see how things go against in Indiana. But seems like that should be a blowout. But we'll see. So, all right, let's get into these final three, these top three teams. Who do you got? Who's your first team here? And you can go in and I don't really have them ordered, although I do have a number one, but I don't really have them ordered.
Yeah. My number one, I think, is going to be the Chicago Bears. Feels like a little bit of a cop-out, but it's simple. It's easy. To get two top 10 picks. Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, I think, were the perfect guys for those. Mm-hmm. And I think, there's other parts of this offseason I have issues with for the Bears. I don't love the coaching situation. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. I didn't love that that DeAndre Swift was the first free agent signing of anybody. Thought that was a little bit weird. Mm-hmm. But you got the top quarterback and a receiver to pair with him, and you got Keenan Allen, and you got a good defense. Like, I gotta rate this highly.
Yeah. Listen, it's one of those ones where, to me, I don't think there's another option. How could you possibly have another option? For me, at least, and that's kind of the way I look at it. And I just say, well, you bolstered your offensive line, and you have been bolstering your offensive line, right? You drafted a guy in the top 10 last year, Darnell Wright, who looked really good last year. You draft Karan Amagaji at 75, right? And you draft Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, and before you draft Caleb Williams, you trade for Keenan Allen. You traded for DJ Moore already, right? As part of that deal moving back last year. So you're talking about a wide receiver core with Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore. Like, that's a solid wide receiving core. That's probably the best offensive system any number one quarterback has ever walked into, right? As far as a number one overall pick, because typically those teams are terrible, and that's why they're walking into that situation. Even like Troy Aikman, of course, that team ended up being great. They were awful his first year. Awful. They went, 1-15 his first year or something like that? So, it becomes one of those situations where it's like he's walking into a system that is already set up for him to succeed with a good to very good offensive line in front of him and good to very good weapons around him. And like you say, did they overpay for DeAndre Swift a little bit? I do think so. But they're trying to get him another piece offensively. And I can't argue with that. So trying to surround your number one quarterback with as many pieces as you can get, and then saying, we think this guy's a generational guy. We're going to give him the keys right off the bat, and he's going to be incredible. And then we'll see what happens. And, of course, who knows? Maybe Rome Odunze stinks. Maybe Caleb Williams is a bust. Maybe, who knows? I mean, maybe DeAndre Swift gets hurt again. Like, there's no way to know. But right now, I think they've set themselves up to be as successful as possible. I still don't think they'll win the division. I think the Packers should still win the division, but I think they've set themselves up to be competing for a playoff spot day one. And that's something special in my opinion. So
do we both have them in our top three?
Yeah, they're my number one. Also my top three are the Detroit Lions.
Yep. I also have them in mind.
Look at that. So the Detroit Lions, I thought, did a really nice job. They lost Gardner Johnson, but they drafted two good corners, right? Terrion Arnold, Ernest Rakestraw Jr. I like that a lot. They signed Marcus Davenport. They signed Amik Robinson. So I thought that what they did was very good. They also signed Jared Goff to a huge extension. Now, you can poo-poo that and say, well, Jared Goff stinks and he's not this and he's that. He has worked for what they've wanted to do. What they've wanted to do and the way they've built this team, Jared Goff has worked for them. And I think this whole thing that he has built, that Dan Campbell has built, is based off of it's us. It's our guys. It's us. We do it. We're the guys. We're this. It's a whole team. Now you can't turn around and say, but Jared's not the guy. We're going to pay someone else. Like, Jared's brought you to this point, right? You got to pay him. Now, there's an out after 2 years. And so if it doesn't work out, you can get out of it for fairly cheap money. But he deserves that money. He's played like it. He has. He's played like that number one overall pick that he was. And, we'll see if he can continue to do that. But he deserves that right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have the Lions in this. I liked how they addressed their secondary, which I think was a big position of need for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're in my top three because I think they did address a lot of needs, and I think signing your players is important. I just look at, what percentage of the cap that Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, and Jared Goff are going to take up pretty soon here, and that terrifies me because you're looking at like a very good left tackle. That's fine. Like Sewell, that's fine. But you're giving a lot of money to a slot receiver and a quarterback who might be at the very top of the can win with him group and not in the win because of him group. And that scares me.
Yep.
That can go in a lot of directions. And, I don't think it's crazy to think the Lions are going to find themselves in a position like the Rams did a couple of years ago where they feel like they're maxing out with the quarterback and they got to go for somebody else. And I don't know. I'm putting them in this tier because I generally liked the things that they did and I have faith in that front office and I liked the picks, but there was a lot of there's a serious amount of hesitation behind this as well.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the other thing about the Goff thing is that, and you say they could be in that similar situation as the Rams. The Rams then won the Super Bowl when they traded for Matthew Stafford, right? So that's the other part of it, is that they gave up a lot to get Stafford, but because they were set up the way that they were then able to move on from Goff and get that number one guy. And where the fact that the fact they have the out after 2 years is huge because they're able to move on from Goff if they need to get, another guy if they need to. And so, we'll see. But I agree with your assessment that it is tough. It's like one of those things that, can he really take that next step to be a superstar, or is he just good enough to get you kind of to, be in that final four spot that they were in? So, all right, what's your last team in the NFC?
I got the Los Angeles Rams here. I feel like there's a kind of a teardrop in quality of offseason after this.
Yeah.
But the Rams are tough because they lost Aaron Donald. But I think the way they attacked the draft and especially getting the pair of Florida State guys there.
They had a first round pick. for the first time
Yeah.
since Jared Goff. That's the last first
I-
round pick they made.
Yeah. When you get a pair of guys from the same defensive line to step in and help do that, I think worked.
Yeah.
They moneyballed this. They were literally like, we're just going to recreate Aaron Donald in the aggregate by drafting
Yep.
multiple players, which I think is the only way to do that at this point. Like, there's no secret formula to just drafting the best defensive player of the generation.
Yeah.
If there was, you'd make a lot of money having it. So I think the Rams adjusted about as well as they could, and are probably in a good spot for now. I don't have a whole lot to say about them. I just kind of think you could put a lot of teams in this third spot. The Rams are where I landed.
Yeah, I was having a hard time choosing between two, and I was hoping you'd take one of them, and you didn't. So thanks a lot. Thanks for the help. But
Who are your two? You can give them both.
no, I know. My two are the Cardinals, who
Mhm.
they lost to Hollywood Brown, but of course they drafted Marvin Harrison Jr. I just love the fact that they added on to what they already had, right? They signed Jonah Williams. They drafted Paris Johnson last year, so they signed Jonah Williams. I like that. They sign, Bilal Nichols, who, defensive tackle. They bring in a few defensive tackles. They draft Tip Raymond. So they hit on some guys there, which I liked. And so I liked that part of what they did. I think they're still growing. I don't know what's going to happen with Kyler Murray. I'm not sure how that situation is going to play out. I don't love the fact that they didn't resolve that this offseason. But they drafted the best player available. They drafted the guy that, if it weren't for the three quarterbacks, would have gone number one overall. Right? And it wasn't even close. And there were some people saying you should draft the number one overall if you need a quarterback still, and which I think is stupid. But either way, I think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is a great player. And kind of is who he is, and we'll go from there. So, but anyways, that's the idea there. And then my second team was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think Tampa. I know some people don't like what Tampa did because they ran it back with Baker and Mike Evans, but they were also successful with Baker and Mike Evans. And so, what other quarterback were you going to get to be better than what Baker was? Now, I don't know if Baker's going to be that guy. I don't know if he can continuously do that, but you saw it from him last year in that offense. I thought it made sense, and let's see what happens. Now, I don't know, but I do like the fact also they drafted Graham Barton, they drafted Bucky Irving, and they drafted, who the heck's the guy? Did they draft Barton in the first round? Yeah, they did, right? They drafted Barton in the first round. So, and they drafted Jalen McMillan as well. That's who I was thinking of. And so I liked that. You franchise tag Antoine Winfield, which we'll see how that plays out. But I think that's kind of the situation that I'm in. So that's what I liked about their thing. I know some people aren't going to like that, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, my anxiety with the Bucs is losing Dave Canales. And especially you mentioned Geno Smith taking a step back last season. Like Dave Canales was in Seattle in 2022. Then he was in 2023 with Baker. And I was in Carolina. I look at that. My first thought is he just really good at getting some of these quarterbacks to play well and have the Seahawks and now Buccaneers attach themselves to quarterbacks they maybe shouldn't have attached themselves to. Because, they got one good season out of them. And I can't hate on it because I think you gotta. When you have a quarterback that plays well, you have to.
Right.
You have to stick by him. Because if you're a team that if you have a quarterback play well and then you let him walk out the building as a GM, you will lose your job. Like that's if he goes elsewhere, and plays well, or if you can't replace him, you're done. So you don't really have another option when you run the team. But it gives me anxiety that the Buccaneers may be 8-9 next year and second place in that division behind Atlanta, and Baker is okay.
Right.
And they're picking.
And you locked yourself up long term to Mike Evans, and you're like, oh god.
Yeah. But I will say, I was a proponent of bringing Mike Evans to New England, but also there's some strong statistical evidence that guys like Mike Evans at this point in their careers are 1-2 years away from falling off that cliff.
Right.
And there's a world where Tampa is mediocre this year and then falls off a cliff the year after. And it's probably picking top 5 in 2026. Like that is very much within the realm of possibility.
Yeah. And that's a very good point. Now, I will say the one thing about Baker is that Baker's deal is pretty big, is sizable. However, his dead cap is not very big after this year.
Yeah, they didn't like they're not attaching a ton of money to him. It's more so that like I think they're hoping they can win the NFC South and improve in what they did last year. I think there's a real chance last year was as good as it got with that group when you take a half step back and we're just kind of stuck. He's not your franchise quarterback. He's just a guy for now.
Well, and I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. By the way, Tony asked a question which is related to what we've been talking about here. Do you think we have a chance to win against the Seahawks? And we talked about this last week. I think we do. I think we do think that they have a chance to beat the Seahawks.
Our last episode that was back on Friday, right?
Yep, Friday afternoon. Yep.
Yeah. I picked New England to beat Seattle. I think it's their first win of the season. We'll see if it comes true, but I like their chances in that one.
I agree. So, and especially after the offseason, we talked about after the offseason they had. I like it. So, anyways, all right. That's it, I think. Right? You got anything else you want to add?
Anything else?
All right, cool.
I'm good.
So that's our best and worst NFC off seasons. We'll be doing more kind of drafts and things like that on Mondays. That'll kind of be our Monday show. And then our Thursday shows will be, well, who knows? Well, this week we'll be talking about OTAs because OTAs will continue. But then we'll figure out something from there. So
yeah, we'll have it's the off season, so we'll have a variety of shows to do as we get through this to fill the time between now and actual real football news.
Exactly. We're almost there, guys. We've made it through the draft. We're at OTAs already. It's almost the summer. We're like 2 months away. 2 months away from training camp. We're almost there. So it's pretty wild to think we're only 2 months away from training camp, but it's pretty nice. Pretty nice. So anyways, thanks for listening, guys. As always, we appreciate you guys. And we'll see you on Thursday night when we finish talking about OTAs and what the Patriots look like the rest of the week. As I'm sure we're going to be able to glean so much information off of them and know whether they're going to be a good team or not by the end of the week. It's going to be great. So we'll see you guys then.